but I also want to thank the library staff, particularly the Thornton library staff. They are so good to me. Pretty much if I ask John Bratcher, our director, for something, he makes sure that he assigns it or he does it himself and it gets done. And I want to recognize, want to give a shout out to a few of those today. We have Christine Grant in the audience, who is our assistant director. She helps me with some of the technical aspects of doing the flyers, because I'm not that good with that. And Mark Pace, our North Carolina room specialist. And Ginger out front, if you met her, she did the window display, and Victoria Holden and Shirley McCadden and Mark, they all help, and John Bratcher, they all help with the getting videotape set up. So I do not want to forget our staff. We could not do this without them. For those who don't know me, I'm Martha Morton, Vice Chair of the Granville County Library System Board of Trustees and the organizer of this event. I usually share co-hosting duties with our very talented and dedicated library director, Jonathan Bratcher. However, I am hopeful that he will be joining us at any time, as he had a pressing out-of-town commitment and he very much wants to be here. It is such a privilege to welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Walter Mears, and his wife, Mrs. Fran Mears. It has been said that good things come to those who wait. That is especially true of this very special presentation. It took nearly 3 years to make this happen. After first learning of our speaker back in late 2013, when I read about a talk that he gave in Chapel Hill, I knew I wanted him to speak at our library. However, one of the hurdles that I often face in booking speakers is obtaining their contact information. And by the way, I don't stalk. After more than 2 years of checking the internet, off and on for leads, I was able to book him this past March with the help of the good people of Duke University's Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. The day after he graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Vermont's Middlebury College, our guest began work for the Associated Press and did not leave until he retired 45 years later. Of note, in 1962, he covered the Cuban Missile Crisis from the Pentagon. On November 22, 1963, following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, he was sent to the White House, where he documented newly sworn-in President Lyndon Johnson's first moments back at the White House, following his return on Air Force One from Dallas. In 1965, he conducted an interview with former Vice President and 1960 presidential candidate Richard Nixon, in which Nixon outlined his plans for another presidential run in 1968. On March 31st, 1968, it was our guest who informed presidential candidate and Senator Gene McCarthy that President Johnson had just announced that he would not seek re-election. And the list goes on and on. As one of the most influential political reporters in Washington, he covered historic events, presidents, presidential candidates, and just about every notable political figure of the mid to late 20th century. Walter Mears, Pulitzer Prize winner and former Associated Political reporter, will present the program, The Race for the White House, Then and Now. In his presentation, Mears will discuss the 2016 presidential campaign within the context of his coverage of 11 campaigns from 1960 to 2000 for the Associated Press, thereby providing an historical perspective. During a long and distinguished career with the AP, Walter Mears was a national political reporter, Washington, D.C. bureau chief, executive editor, vice president, and columnist. From 1960 to 2000, Mears covered 11 presidential campaigns for the AP, beginning with Kennedy versus Nixon and ending with Bush versus Gore. He was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for National Reporting in 1977 for covering the 1976 presidential campaign. Mears is the author of the 2003 book, Deadlines Past. He also co-authored The News Business and The New News Business with the late NBC News anchor John Chancellor. Walter Mears lives in Chapel Hill with his wife Fran, a former Baltimore bureau chief for the AP, and a former managing editor for News and Connect News Service in Washington, D.C. Now, after a nearly 3-year wait, I am delighted to present Mr. Walter Mears.
I have to say, I didn't realize I was that hard to find. But I'm glad to be here, and I appreciate you all coming out on a Sunday afternoon when football is more inviting than listening to old political reporters. I saw the sign on your library door that no firearms are allowed, so I've had my Secret Service contingent disarmed. I want to begin with a warning. I rely on the experience Martha talked about over the past 50 years when discussing presidential campaigns. In 2016, experience is overrated. I have never seen a presidential campaign like this one. We are facing a choice between the two most unpopular major party nominees since polling began. The question seems to be whether voters mistrust Hillary Clinton more than they dislike Donald Trump. Both of them have negative ratings in the 60% range, Clinton just below, Trump just above. Some days they seem to be in a contest to make it worse. Trump just came around to conceding that President Obama was born in the United States. Why are we still talking about this? After claiming falsely that Hillary Clinton started the birther business in 2008. The fact is that Trump started the birther business and built his earliest political career around that one issue. He has said that about Clinton before, and it's been researched before, and it is false, but that is nothing unusual for Trump. He now says that he's done the great service of putting the issue to rest, which I guess was his task since he was the one that did most to create it. He also says that he's never been irresponsible on it. I would beg to differ. When Obama's long-form birth certificate was published, Trump said he'd send detectives to prove that it was fraudulent. So it's not a story of fixing what you did wrong, and he still can't bring himself to say that he's sorry for all that he did. Then again, Clinton has her own problems. She flunked basic political campaigning the day she declared that about half of Trump's supporters belong in a basket of deplorables, whatever that is. She treated it like it was a common phrase. I have never heard it anywhere before. It gained something in the translation. It must be Greek or something. I don't know. In any event, insulting voters, and that means any voters, is counterproductive. You could almost call it deplorable. You don't persuade people to support you by saying stuff like that. You try to persuade the opposition to change their ways and come around. All she did with her nonsensical statement was to make sure that Trump supporters turn out on election day and vote against her and provide grist for the Trump TV campaign against her. The deplorable ad, which I'm sure many of you have seen, is one of the few honest TV ads that the Trump campaign has put on the air. By this time, it would make sense that Clinton and her people would realize that the way to get people to trust her is to tell them what's going on. So when she got pneumonia, she tried to keep it a secret. She could have got she would have avoided a whole lot of political trouble if she'd just taken a weekend off and stayed sick in bed. There are no secrets for a presidential campaign. And the zone of privacy that seems almost to be a fetish with her does not exist when you're seeking the presidency. Her privacy and secrecy motives have led to the biggest persistent problem in her campaign, which is the private email server she set up when she was Secretary of State. I think her motive was to avoid the Freedom of Information law that covers official emails and to keep her emails secret unto herself. It's not the first time that secrecy has hurt her. When President Clinton put her in charge of drafting a health care reform law, she did it all behind closed doors, sprung it on Congress with no real preparation, and couldn't even get it brought to a vote in a Democratic Senate. There was no groundwork done. It was like all of a sudden we're going to change 17% of the economy and I'll tell you how, which is almost Trumpian, the arrogance of it. Anyhow, that healthcare should have been a lesson to her, but it didn't take. Trump so far is getting away with his own secrecy. He won't publish his tax returns, despite the 40-year tradition in which every presidential nominee has done so. He says it was because he's under audit, which is no barrier according to the IRS. Now his son says that the real reason is that to make the taxes public would be a distraction from his message. I think that's the true motive, because I suspect that his returns would show that he is paid at a far lower rate than most of us here in this room on his income taxes. And according to some tax analysts, it's quite possible that he paid nothing at all in income taxes. It's not illegal. There are so many tax advantages available to a real estate billionaire that write-offs cover almost everything. But to disclose such a low tax rate would become a very damaging issue, as Mitt Romney found out when he did. At least he paid, I think, 15 or 16% of his income. Again, lower than most of us, but something. By all logic, Donald Trump should be crushed in the November election. About the only groups he has not yet offended are the ones he hasn't mentioned yet. But logic doesn't apply this year. He once said that he could get away with murder. He could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and it wouldn't hurt him, it wouldn't cost him a vote. Politically, he is getting away with murder. He calls the system rigged, which is his word for any system that doesn't do exactly what he wants it to do. Actually, the rigging is working in his favor. He denounces the system, he misstates, he misrepresents, he lies, and then he denounces any reporter or analyst who calls him out on it. And there are surveys showing that more people trust him, to be honest, than trust Clinton. As I said, she is her own worst enemy. Every major problem she has in this campaign is dwarfed by the problem of trust and honesty. And it all stems from her view of herself and her own prerogatives. People do not trust her because she has too often shown that she doesn't trust them with information that she simply doesn't want to share. In this campaign, which seems to hinge so much not on what candidates would do as president, we haven't been talking much about that. Clinton has, Trump has not, and then he has the audacity to say that Clinton hasn't put forth any programs. She's put forth so many that you can't read them all without going to sleep. I think because of the personality style issue that has become so critical in this campaign, the debates starting on October 26th are going to be pivotal. Trump used insults and far-out claims to dominate in the Republican primary debates, which worked in that crowd. It might not play so well in a one-on-one national debate. Anyhow, Trump is already saying that the debates are going to be rigged against him. He says Lester Holt won't be fair to him as a moderator. He doesn't like the role of moderators because of the danger that they might say, wait a minute, that's not so. Clinton is going to be challenged to keep her temper and to present herself as a voice of reason and responsibility. attributes which the Trump people at this point don't seem to care about. That most of the polls are tightening. Trump seems to be gaining in states like Ohio and Florida, where some surveys show him ahead. Still, most of the surveys show Clinton with a clearer path than Trump to the 270 electoral votes it would take to be elected president. Since a presidential election really is 50 state elections for those electoral votes, the third-party candidates may have an impact on the outcome. Gary Johnson, the libertarian who wants to cut defense spending in half, do away with the IRS, and various other things that nobody even pays any attention to, is not going to win the election, but he could alter it by siphoning support away from the major candidates. You would think that a former Republican governor of New Mexico would take more votes from Trump's ticket, but his support seems to be coming from both sides, and there are some surveys that show he is doing slightly more to take away votes from Clinton. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, shows even less support, but again, she could hurt Clinton. Don't forget that Ralph Nader's Green Party ego trip in 2000 probably made George Bush president over Al Gore. That said, third-party candidates usually lose ground as voting day approaches. A modern exception was Ross Perot, the strange candidate who quit in 1992 for a while because he said the Republicans were going to sabotage his daughter's wedding in Dallas. Then he got back in after she was safely wed and claimed a spot in the debates, and he got 19% of the vote against Bill Clinton and the first President Bush. A modern record for a third-party candidate. He didn't carry any states. George Wallace did carry 6 states when he ran, when he got 18% of the vote, not 19. The Perot example is why Johnson campaigned so hard for a debate slot. Although its best polls are in the 9% range, well short of the 15% the debate sponsor has set since 2000 as its standard for third candidates who want in. Actually, that 15% threshold goes back before the debate commission, which now is producing the debates. In any event, I think excluding a figure like Johnson and certainly Stein is the right thing to do, because a head-on debate between the two people who have a real shot at winning the presidency, I think, is going to serve voters far better than another crowd debate like the ones we saw during the primaries. During all my years as a political reporter for the Associated Press, objectivity was my first rule. I had my preferences, but they were personal. No one, not even my family, knew my choice or my vote. We all have preferences and opinions. Professional journalists in my time did not show them or let them influence what they reported and what they wrote. I say in my time because I think that discipline is too often lacking now. There are straight reporters there, but there are a lot more commentators. And there are too many people treating the commentary as a source of news. Opinion is not news. The trouble is that the lines are blurred. Good journalists try to get both sides of the story and provide balanced accounts. Trump is using that to his advantage. It is a false balance when an outright lie is called a misstatement or a misrepresentation or some other cover word. A lie is a lie. That's a problem now. Cable TV thrives on Trump's most outrageous statements. And I think his coverage is being graded on a curve. He is not held to the same standard as Clinton. The presumption going in is that she's a responsible figure and that she's going to be held to that account. And Trump gets a pass on so much, it's incredible. What is the idiotic statement of the NBC moderator the other day, the other week, that nobody would expect Trump to be deeply read or schooled about foreign policy? everybody should expect out of him or anybody else who wants to be president. It certainly is expected of Clinton, and properly so. That and openness, as I said, which is her biggest problem. Again, the emails. In hindsight, I don't think Bernie Sanders did the Democrats or Clinton a favor when he said at the beginning of the primary campaign, "I don't care about your damned emails." She'd be better off today if he had pressed her on the issue and had hammered at her and forced her to address it last spring. It would have been far less damaging than it has become. One thing that has never been addressed is the real-world impact of the whole business. Did her email misconduct allow secrets to get out? And did they harm U.S. interests? The FBI said she was careless with secrets and left it there and brought no charges. Nobody has suggested anything to indicate that any of those emails damaged national security. As for secrecy, Trump doesn't seem to worry about it much. Presidential candidates get secret CIA intelligence briefings, and none, dating back to Dwight Eisenhower, talked about it for political advantage after receiving the briefing. Trump did, and he claimed, as you may recall, that the body language of his briefers told him they were frustrated that President Obama wasn't taking their advice. By one account, Trump's intemperate advisor, General Mike Flynn, who sounds like Dr. Strangelove, kept interrupting the briefers to the point that Governor Christie told him to shut up or calm down, depending on which version you take. Anybody who talks so much that Christie has to shut up must be off the charts. Trump also said